everyone, it's time to settle in for a journey back through the mists of time. Dim the lights, grab your favorite blanket, maybe crack a window for that cool night breeze. If you're like me and love getting lost in history's nooks and crannies, hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. London, New York, or maybe somewhere tucked away like the village we're visiting tonight. Alright, let's dive into the 12th century, into the heart of a medieval village in Europe. Picture this, no skyscrapers, no Wi-Fi, just a cluster of thatched huts hugging crooked paths, surrounded by fields that stretch under a moody, gray sky. This isn't the Knights and Castles fantasy, it's raw, muddy, and alive with human grit. Imagine you're standing at the edge of this village. It's 1150, somewhere in the rolling hills of England or maybe northern France. The air hits you first, it's thick with the sharp tang of wood smoke curling from chimneys. Every breath carries that earthy mix of damp soil and livestock, because, yeah, the cows and pigs aren't far off. Your boots sink slightly into the mud of the path, churned up by cartwheels that creak and groan like they're singing a tired old song. Listen closely, there's the distant lowing of cattle, a soft, mournful sound that blends with the cluck of chickens scratching nearby. Overhead, the sky is a heavy blanket of gray, threatening rain again. This is no postcard village with manicured gardens. It's a patchwork of wattle and daub huts, their straw roofs sagging like they're just as weary as the folks inside. The paths twist and turn, no rhyme or reason, just following where feet have trodden for generations. It's chaotic, sure, but there's a strange beauty in it, like the village grew out of the earth itself. You wander deeper, and it's not just the sights and smells pulling you in, it's the rhythm of life. These villages, they're small, maybe a couple hundred souls at most, all crammed into this muddy little world. Every hut's built the same, walls of woven sticks slathered with mud and straw, a roof of thatch that leaks when the storms get nasty. Inside, it's dark, smoky, with a single fire in the center casting flickering shadows. No fancy furniture, just a few stools, a rickety table, and straw-stuffed mats for sleeping. But step outside, and you see the fields that keep this place alive. Strips of barley, rye, and oats ripple in the breeze, divided into narrow plots each family works. Beyond that, there's the common pasture where sheep and cows graze, and maybe a patch of forest where kids scrounge for firewood. It's a world that feels both vast and claustrophobic, tied to the land in a way we can barely fathom today. Here's something that might hit home. These villagers, they didn't have their own ovens. Nope, not like your kitchen with its shiny appliances. Baking bread, the stuff of life, was a group effort. Picture it, a stone oven, squat and dome-shaped, sitting at the village's heart. Every few days, families haul their dough to this one oven, tended by someone's grumpy uncle or a widow who knows the fire like the back of her hand. The air fills with the warm, yeasty scent of rising bread, and for a moment, the village feels like one big family. You're there, jostling with neighbors, swapping gossip about who's dodging their taxes or whose pig got loose again. Kids dart around, stealing scraps of dough, while the adults argue over whose loaf gets the hottest spot. It's messy, loud, and kind of wonderful, a ritual that stitches the village together. You can almost taste the crusty bread, still warm, shared over a rough table later that night. But don't get too cozy. This life, it's no picnic. That bread you're munching took backbreaking work to grow, harvest, and grind. And that's just the start. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of this medieval world, and trust me, it's a wild ride. We'll walk through the daily grind of a peasant's life. Spoiler, it's not glamorous. Think dawn to dusk labor, wrestling with stubborn soil and praying the weather doesn't screw you over. Then there's the social rules, so strict they make your HOA look chill. The Lord's up there, demanding his cut, while the church keeps everyone in line with sermons and tithes. And yet, somehow, these villagers keep going, finding ways to laugh, love, and survive in a world that's trying its best to break them. That's what's coming up. Stories of toil, rules, and resilience that'll make you rethink what it means to be human. For now, let's linger here, by that communal oven, the fire crackling, the village humming with life. Take a deep breath of that smoky air, and let's keep walking. As you stroll past the oven, you notice the kids chasing each other, their bare feet slapping the mud. An old woman, her face like weathered leather, is scolding them, but there's a twinkle in her eye. Nearby, a cart rumbles by, its driver muttering about the ruts in the path. You can't help but feel the pulse of this place. It's not just a collection of huts, it's a living, breathing community. Every person here knows every other, for better or worse. Feuds simmer, sure, but so does loyalty. If a hut catches fire, the whole village shows up with buckets. If a family's harvest fails, neighbors slip them a few onions or a hunk of cheese. It's not charity, it's survival. You're starting to see it, aren't you? This isn't just a backdrop for knights and kings. This muddy, smoky village is the heartbeat of the medieval world, where ordinary folks carve out a life against the odds. Let's pause by a field, where a man's bent over, hacking at the soil with a wooden hoe. His tunic's patched, his hands calloused, but there's a stubborn set to his jaw. He's not thinking about history books or epic battles, he's thinking about getting enough barley to feed his kids through winter. That's the real story here, the one Hollywood skips. No shining armor, just sweat and dirt. And yet, there's something almost poetic about it. The way the fields curve under the sky, the way the village clings to its routines, it's like a song sung in defiance of a hard world. You're standing in it, feeling the weight of it, and it's humbling. These people, they're not so different from us, chasing the same things, a full belly, a warm bed, a reason to smile at the end of the day. Now, we're diving into the heart of what it meant to be a peasant in this world. Picture yourself waking up in one of those Waterland daub huts. It's barely dawn, the kind of gray, chilly morning that makes you want to pull the blanket tighter, except your blanket's a threadbare scrap of wool, and the rooster's already screaming like it's got a personal vendetta. You're a peasant, so sleeping in. Not an option. You roll off your straw mat, stiff from yesterday's work, and the air's damp, smoky, with that faint whiff of manure that never quite goes away. Your hut's cramped, maybe 15 feet across, shared with your spouse, a couple of kids, and, oh yeah, the animals. Cows, pigs, maybe a goat, all huddling in the corner for warmth. You're not just living with them, they're practically family. You toss them some scraps, pull on your rough tunic, and head out. The day's already calling, and it's not gentle. Step outside, and the village is stirring. The fields are waiting, and they don't care that you're back screaming or that you're still half asleep. If it's spring, you're out there with a wooden plow, wrestling it through the heavy, clay-packed soil while your ox, assuming you're lucky enough to have one, grumbles like it's got better things to do. Summer. You're scything barley or rye, the sun beating down, your hands blistered from the rough handle. Fall's a race against time, harvesting crops before the frost sneaks in like a thief. Winter's no break either. You're mending tools, tending livestock, or trudging through snow to gather firewood. Every season's got its own flavor of grueling, and there's no such thing as a weekend. You're tied to the land like it's got you on a leash, and the work never stops. Now, let's talk about what makes this life brutal. First off, the weather's your worst enemy. No weather apps, no forecasts, just you, squinting at the sky, praying it doesn't dump rain on your barley right before harvest. Too much rain, and your crops rot in the field. Too little, and they wither. A bad harvest doesn't just mean a lean year, it means hunger gnawing at your gut, your kids looking at you with big eyes, asking for more. And then there's disease, creeping through the village like a ghost. No doctors, no antibiotics, just a priest muttering prayers and some herbs that might as well be weeds for all the good they do. Dysentery, smallpox, even a bad flu could wipe out half your neighbors. You're living on a knife's edge, and every cough's a warning. The tools don't help either. Forget shiny steel plows or fancy machines. You're working with stuff that looks like it was cobbled together by a toddler. Your hoe's a chunk of wood with an iron tip, if you're lucky. Your sickle's dull, forcing you to hack harder at the stalks. Plowing. It's you and maybe a neighbor, yanking a creaky wooden plow through dirt that fights back. Every task takes twice as long, and your body pays the price. By your 30s, if you make it that far, your back's hunched, your hands are claws, and your knees creak louder than the cartwheels. It's the kind of labor that grinds you down, day after day, until you're as much a part of the earth as the crops you're growing. Here's a detail that might make you blink. A lot of peasants didn't just live with their animals, they slept with them. Yeah, you heard that right. Your bed's a straw mat on the dirt floor, and right next to you is Betsy the cow, chewing her cud, or a couple of pigs snuffling in their sleep. Why? Warmth. Those animals are like living heaters, and in a drafty hut with no insulation, you take what you can get. It's not exactly cozy. Imagine the smell, the fleas, the occasional hoof in your face, but it's practical. The line between home and barn, pretty much non-existent. You're sharing space, breath, and probably a few germs with your livestock. It's a humbling reminder of how close to the edge these folks lived, where survival trumped comfort every time. So, how do you keep going in a life this tough? That's where the quiet strength comes in. You're out there, day after day, knowing the odds are stacked against you. The Lord's demanding his share of your crops, the church wants its tithe, and the weather's flipping you the bird. But you don't quit. You can't. Your family's counting on you, and giving up's not in the vocabulary. There's a grit to it, a stubbornness that's almost beautiful. You see it in the way a mother patches her kid's tunic for the third time, or a father spends his one free hour carving a wooden toy. It's not loud heroism, it's the kind that whispers, steady and unyielding. And then there are the moments that make it bearable. Picture this, it's evening, the work's done, and you're crammed around a wobbly table with your family. The fire's crackling, casting shadows on the walls. Dinner's simple, pottage, maybe some barley stew with a bit of onion, and that crusty bread from the village oven. It's not a feast, but it's warm, and you're sharing it. Your kids are giggling, your spouse is teasing you about that time you tripped in the mud, and for a moment, the world feels right. These are the sparks that keep you going, the laughter, the stories, the way your neighbor slips you a turnip when your crop fails. It's not much, but it's enough to face another dawn. Let's pull back the curtain on what kept this village from unraveling into chaos. This isn't just a bunch of folks scraping by, it's a world bound by ironclad rules, where everyone knew their place, and stepping out of line could cost you more than a slap on the wrist. Welcome to the rules of village society. Think of it as a game where the stakes are your livelihood, your soul, and maybe your dignity. Imagine you're one of these villagers, waking up to the same muddy paths, the same creaking carts, but there's an invisible web holding it all together. At the top of the heap is the Lord, the guy who owns the land you're standing on. Not owns like you'd own a house today, more like he's got divine permission to call the shots, thanks to the king or some dusty charter. His manor house, maybe a mile off, looms like a storm cloud over the village. It's not a fairy tale castle, just a bigger, sturdier building with actual windows and a fireplace that doesn't choke the room with smoke. But to you, it's a world apart. The Lord's your boss, your landlord, and sometimes your judge, all rolled into one. In return for living on his land, you owe him. Big time. What's that look like? Well, you're not just farming for your family. A chunk of your crops, barley, rye, whatever you've coaxed from the dirt, goes straight to the Lord. That's the rent, paid in grain or maybe a few chickens if you're lucky. Then there's labor. You're on the hook for working his fields, too, plowing and harvesting his crops before you even touch your own. 2 or 3 days a week, you're trudging to his domain, the fancy term for his personal farmland, while your own plots sit waiting. Oh, and don't forget the extra taxes. A marriage in the family. Pay the Lord a fee. Want to grind your grain at his mill? Cough up a portion of the flour. Even when you die, your best cow or your favorite cloak might go to him as a Harriet. It's like the medieval version of a subscription service you never signed up for, and canceling's not an option. But it's not just the Lord breathing down your neck. The church is right there, too, with its own set of demands. Picture the village church, squat, stone-walled, maybe the only building not made of mud and straw. It's the heart of the village, not just for your soul but for your social life. Sunday Mass is non-negotiable. You're there, crammed onto wooden benches, the air thick with incense, and the priest's Latin droning like a lullaby you don't understand. It's not just about salvation. It's where you catch up with neighbors, hear the latest gossip, maybe even size up a potential spouse for your kid. But the church isn't just giving you warm fuzzies, it's got its hand out, too. The tithe, a tenth of everything you grow or raise, goes to the priest. That's right, 1 out of every 10 sheaves of wheat, every 10 eggs, even a jug of your precious ale. Skip it, and you're not just risking a lecture, you're flirting with eternal consequences, or so they say. The church doesn't stop at money. It's the moral police, too. You're living under a code stricter than any HOA. Adultery. Gossiping too much. Working on a holy day. The priest's watching, and he's not shy about calling you out. Penance might mean fasting, public confession, or worse, a stint in the stocks for everyone to gawk at. It's not just about keeping you in line, it's about keeping the whole village on the same page. The church is the glue, the rhythm, the heartbeat of this place. Sunday Mass isn't just a service, it's the one time everyone's together, from the poorest serf to the Lord's steward, all under the same leaky roof, praying for a better harvest or maybe just a break from the rain. Now, here's where it gets spicy. What happens when things go wrong? Say you and your neighbor are brawling over whose pig ate whose cabbages. Or maybe someone's caught stealing a loaf of bread, not exactly a crime spree, but in a village where every crumb counts, it's a big deal. That's where the manor court comes in. Picture a drafty hall in the Lord's manor, a long table, and the Lord, or more likely his steward, sitting there like a medieval Judge Judy. The whole village might show up, because this isn't just justice, it's entertainment. The court handles everything from land disputes to who owes what to whom. But it's not all dry legal stuff. Steal that loaf. You might end up in the stocks, stuck in the village square while kids chuck rotten apples at you. Gossip too much. You could be forced to walk the village with a shame mask, a heavy iron contraption that screams, "Mind your own business." It's public shaming, medieval style, and it's as much about keeping the peace as it is about punishment. These manor courts were wild, because they weren't just about settling scores, they were a stage for village drama. Everyone's got an opinion, and the court's where it all spills out. You're there, watching your neighbor try to explain why his cow wandered into the Lord's field, while the steward rolls his eyes and the crowd snickers. But it's not all laughs. The court reinforces the hierarchy. The Lord's word is final, and if he says you owe an extra day's labor, you're not arguing. It's a reminder, you're not free. You're tied to the land, to the Lord, to the church, to the rules that keep this whole rickety system from collapsing. So, how does this all feel? On one hand, these rules, the Lord's taxes, the church's tithes, the manor court's judgments, they're like chains. They keep you in your place, no questions asked. You're a serf, maybe not a slave, but not far off. You can't just pack up and leave. The Lord owns the land, and you're part of the package. It's oppressive, no sugarcoating it. The feudal system's designed to keep the powerful on top and the rest of you scrambling. And yet, there's another side. These same rules create a kind of glue. The church's rituals, the court's rulings, even the Lord's demands, they give the village shape, a rhythm you can count on. You know where you stand, who's got your back, who you can trust. When the harvest fails or a neighbor's sick, it's the community, bound by these rules, that pulls through. You share a loaf, lend a hand, because you're all in this together, like it or not. But let's not kid ourselves, tensions brewing under the surface. You're working the Lord's fields while your own crops rot, and it stings. You're tithing to a church that sometimes feels more like a tax collector than a savior. And that neighbor who got off easy at the manor court. Yeah, you're not inviting him to dinner. The rules keep the village ticking, but they also spark grudges, whispers, the kind of slow burn resentment that can flare up when the pressure's too much. It's a tightrope walk, community on one side, conflict on the other, and you're all balancing together. Let's turn toward a figure who's more than just a villager, more than just a cog in the feudal machine. He's the one everyone turns to when the world feels too heavy, when sins need confessing or disputes need untangling. Meet the village priest, a man who's half shepherd, half neighbor, and all too human. His influence stretches beyond the stone walls of the church, weaving through every corner of this muddy little world. Picture the priest's house, tucked next to the church, not much fancier than your own hut. It's got a bit more room, maybe a proper bed instead of a straw mat, but it's still dark, smoky, with a fire that sputters against the chill. The priest himself. He's not the lofty, robed figure you might imagine from stained glass windows. He's a local, born in a village not far from here, maybe the son of a peasant who caught the church's eye. His education's patchy, enough Latin to stumble through mass, a smattering of scripture, and a knack for remembering who owes what to whom. He's not some scholar from Paris, he's one of you, just with a heavier burden. His tunic's as patched as yours, his boots just as muddy, but when he speaks, people listen. Not because he's holy, but because he's the closest thing this village has to a bridge between earth and heaven. His day starts before yours. Dawn's barely cracking the sky when he's up, shuffling into the church to light candles and mutter morning prayers. The church itself is the village's pride, stone walls, a wooden roof that only leaks a little, and a crude wooden cross above the altar. It's not grand, but it's sacred, and he's its keeper. He leads mass, of course, his voice droning through Latin that half the village doesn't understand but listens to anyway. It's not just Sundays, there's prayers for planting season, for rain, for a sick child. You're there, kneeling on the cold floor, watching the candlelight flicker across his face, hoping his words might tip the scales in your favor with the big guy upstairs. But his job's more than just chanting. He's the village's record keeper, scratching births, deaths, and marriages onto parchment with a quill that's always running out of ink. A baby's born. He's there, splashing holy water. Someone's dying. He's at the bedside, whispering last rites, his hand steady even if his heart's not. Then there's the messy stuff. You and your neighbor still fighting over that pig in the cabbages. The priest's the one you drag into it. He's no lawyer, but he's got a knack for listening, for cutting through the shouting to find a compromise. Maybe he'll make you both swear an oath on the church's relic, a splinter of bone said to be from some saint, to keep the peace. He's not perfect at it. Sometimes he picks sides, or his temper flares, and you're left grumbling about how he's no better than the rest of you. Because he's not. He's human, with flaws as big as the village gossip makes them out to be. Maybe he drinks too much ale at the harvest feast, or there's whispers about him and the widow who brings him bread. He's not a saint, just a man trying to hold a village together while wrestling his own demons. But let's talk about a moment that shows what this priest is made of. It's 11:52, and the village is buzzing with something darker than the usual squabbles. A villager, let's call her Agnes, is in trouble. Word spread that she's been muttering things she shouldn't, questioning the church's teachings, maybe even dabbling in old pagan charms to save her failing crops. Heresy's the word on everyone's lips, and it's a dangerous one. The Lord's steward is sniffing around, eager to make an example, and the bishop's men aren't far behind. A trial could mean exile, or worse, a pyre. You're in the crowd, watching Agnes stand in the manor court, her face pale but her chin up. The steward's ready to throw the book at her, but then the priest steps forward. He's not supposed to do this. He's supposed to nod along, let the Lord's justice roll. But this priest, he knows Agnes. He baptized her daughter, buried her husband last winter. He's seen her share her last loaf with a starving neighbor. So he speaks up, his voice steady but his hands shaking. He argues that Agnes was misguided, not heretical, that her words were born of grief, not defiance. He's risking everything, his position, the Lord's favor, maybe his own neck. The steward's furious, the crowd's whispering, but the priest holds his ground. He offers to take her under his guidance, to correct her soul with prayer and penance. It's a gamble, but it works. Agnes walks free, sentenced to a few weeks of fasting and extra prayers, and the village breathes a little easier. The priest, he's got a target on his back now, but he's bought Agnes time, maybe even her life. That moment, it's not just about bravery. It's about the priest's role as the village's anchor. He's not just leading prayers or scribbling records. He's the one who knows everyone's secrets, their fears, their sins. You confess to him in the dark of the church, your voice barely a whisper, and he listens, not always with judgment but with a kind of weary understanding. He's the one who talks the Lord out of doubling your labor when the harvest's bad, or convinces a feuding family to share a plow instead of a fist fight. He's the glue, the voice that reminds you there's something bigger than the mud and the taxes. But he's also one of you, flawed and fallible, carrying the weight of a village's hopes on shoulders that aren't always strong enough. Step back and think about it. This priest, he's not just a religious figure. He's the village's heartbeat, its conscience, its memory. He's there for the big moments, births, deaths, weddings, but also the small ones, like when you're scared the crops won't grow or when you're ashamed of something you can't say aloud. He's shaping this village, not with grand gestures but with 1,000 quiet choices, some brave, some flawed. And that dual role, spiritual guide and community anchor, it's what makes him unforgettable. You can almost see him now, standing by the church door, his face lined with worry but his eyes sharp, watching the village like a shepherd who knows his flock too well. Now, the air feels heavier, the sky darker. The village is about to face its greatest test, not a war or a plague, but something quieter, more insidious, that could break even the toughest spirits. We're talking about famine, the kind of hunger that gnaws at your bones and turns neighbors into lifelines. This is the story of survival, of desperate measures and stubborn hope, in a world where the land itself could turn against you. Imagine it's 1154 and the seasons have been cruel. Last year's harvest was meager, too much rain drowned the barley, and what survived was barely enough to fill the Lord's barns, let alone your own. This year's worse. Spring came late, the field stayed sodden, and the summer sun never showed up. The crops, those precious stalks of rye and oats you poured your sweat into, are stunted, yellowing before they're ripe. By autumn, the truth hits like a hammer, there's not enough to go around. The granaries are half empty, the communal oven's gone cold too often, and the lowing of cattle is fainter, some have already been slaughtered, their meat a grim necessity. You're standing in your hut, staring at a near-empty sack of grain, your kids' faces pinched with hunger. The village, once alive with chatter and cartwheels, feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for a miracle that might not come. Famine isn't a one-time disaster, it's a slow, creeping terror. It's not just empty bellies, it's the dread that settles in, the knowledge that winter's coming and your stores won't last. You're a peasant, used to lean times, but this is different. The fields, your lifeline, have betrayed you. The Lord's still demanding his share, even if it's just a handful of moldy grain. The church is praying, but prayers don't fill pots. You're looking at your family, wondering how to stretch a few handfuls of barley into weeks, maybe months. The hunger's already clawing, a dull ache that keeps you awake on your straw mat next to the cow whose milk has dried up. And it's not just you, every hut in the village is feeling it, every face a mirror of your own worry. So, what do you do when the world starves you? You get desperate. First, you eat what you shouldn't. That sack of grain you were saving for planting next spring. You're grinding it now, even if it's speckled with mold. It's bitter, gritty, and it twists your stomach, but it's something. You're boiling anything that might pass for food, old roots from the forest, nettles that sting your hands, even the husks you'd normally toss to the pigs. The kids are out there, scrounging in the woods for acorns or wild berries, their fingers scratched and dirty. You're bartering, too, trading what you can't afford to lose. That iron hoe, the one you spent years saving for. You swap it with a neighbor for half a sack of oats. Your best cloak, the one that kept you warm through winters. It's gone for a few turnips. Every trade feels like a piece of your future slipping away, but survival doesn't care about tomorrow, it cares about tonight. The village is a patchwork of desperation. You see it in the hollow eyes of the woman who used to share her bread, now clutching a single onion like it's gold. You hear it in the silence where children's laughter used to be, their games replaced by foraging trips. Some are eating things you'd never imagine, spoiled grain that makes them sick, or worse, rumors of bark or clay mixed into bread to make it stretch. It's grim, and the stories spread. A family down the lane lost a child to fever, too weak to fight it off. Another sold their last cow, knowing they'll never plow again. You're walking past huts that feel more like tombs, the fire's low, the air thick with despair. What would you do, staring down this kind of hunger? It's not just physical, it's a weight on your soul, a test of how much you can bear. But here's where the village shows its heart. Even in the leanest times, you're not alone. The communal spirit, the one that baked bread together at the oven, it's still there, frayed but unbroken. Neighbors start pulling what little they have. You've got a handful of barley, the family next door has a few dried apples. Together, it's a pot of thin soup, enough to keep the weakest from slipping away. The widow who's got nothing but a knack for storytelling, she's sharing tales by the fire, keeping spirits up when bellies are empty. The stronger ones, like you, are out foraging, not just for your own kids but for the old man who can't walk far. It's not charity, it's survival. If one falls, the whole village feels it. You're tied together, like threads in a worn tapestry, holding fast against the storm. Picture a scene, it's a cold evening, the sky a bruise of gray and purple. The village is gathered in the churchyard, not for mass but for something simpler. Someone's lit a small fire, and you're all there, sharing what you can, a few roots, a bit of sour ale, a loaf made from the last decent flour. The priest is praying, his voice hoarse but steady, and for once, it feels like he's one of you, not above you. The kids are huddled close, their eyes big but not hopeless. You're passing around a wooden bowl, each family taking a sip, a bite, no one hoarding. It's not enough to fill you, but it's enough to remind you, you're in this together. The Lord Steward might be grumbling about taxes, but here, in this moment, it's just the village, holding the line against the dark. This communal support isn't just a feel-good story, it's the difference between life and death. The weakest, the old, and the young, they're the ones who'd go first without it. You see it in the way a mother slips a bit of her share to her neighbor's toddler, or how the men take turns guarding the communal granary from thieves, because, yeah, desperation can breed that, too. It's not perfect. There's tension, arguments over who's taking too much, whispers about the family that's hiding a secret stash. But the village doesn't break. It bends, it creaks, it leans on the bonds forged in better times, the oven, the church, the shared fields. You're not just surviving for yourself, you're surviving for each other. Now, let's talk about the resilience that carries this village through. Famine isn't a one-off, it's a shadow that looms every few years. You know it could come again, that next year's harvest might fail, too. But you keep going. Why? Because hope is as stubborn as the weeds in your fields. You're already planning, whispering about which seeds to plant, which saint to pray to for rain. You're mending that broken plow, even if it means trading your last good knife. You're telling your kids stories of the year the harvest was so good the Lord threw a feast, not because it's likely, but because it keeps them dreaming. This resilience isn't loud or heroic, it's quiet, woven into the way you share a crust of bread, the way you wake up and face another day, even when your stomach's screaming. Let's shift our gaze to the hands that keep this place alive, not just with prayers or plowshares, but with skill, sweat, and a bit of cunning. We're diving into the crafts of the village trades, the blacksmith, the miller, the weaver, whose work is the pulse of this muddy world. These aren't just jobs, they're the backbone of survival, forging, grinding, and spinning the village into self-sufficiency. Picture the village at midday, the gray sky spitting a light drizzle, the paths alive with the creak of carts and the chatter of folks hauling grain or firewood. Every hut's got its purpose, but a few stand out, their air humming with a different kind of energy. There's the blacksmith's forge, a low, smoky building with a fire that never seems to die. Nearby, the mill squats by the stream, its water wheel groaning as it turns. And in a corner of the village, a weaver's hut hums with the rhythmic clack of a loom. These craftspeople aren't lords or priests, they're villagers like you, but their skills are the gears that keep the whole machine running. Without them, the plows break, the bread goes unmade, and the cold bites harder. Let's start with the blacksmith, the village's own fire tamer. You step into the forge, and it's like walking into a dragon's lair. The air's thick with heat and the sharp tang of charred wood and metal. The fire roars in a stone hearth, its glow casting shadows that dance across the dirt floor. The blacksmith, let's call him Thomas, is a broad-shouldered man, his face smudged with soot, his arms scarred from years of sparks. He's not some mythic hero, he's your neighbor, the guy you saw arguing about taxes at the manor court. But here, he's king. He's working a piece of iron, red hot from the fire, laying it on the anvil with tongs that look older than the village itself. His hammer comes down, clang, a sound that rattles your bones, steady as a heartbeat. Clang. Clang. Each strike shapes the metal, folding it, flattening it, turning a lump of iron into something vital. What's he making? Could be anything. A plowshare to tear through the stubborn clay of the fields. Nails to hold odds timbers together. A horseshoe for the Lord's steward, who's always in a hurry. Maybe even a knife, its edge sharp enough to skin a deer or settle a score. The process is mesmerizing. Thomas pumps the bellows, a creaky leather bag that feeds the fire until it roars. He thrusts the iron into the flames, watching it glow from dull red to blinding orange. Back to the anvil, hammer striking, sparks flying like tiny comets. He's not just banging metal, he's reading it, knowing when it's soft enough to bend, hard enough to hold. When it's done, he dunks it in a barrel of water, and the steam rises like a ghost. It's brutal work, hours of sweat and precision, but every piece he makes is a lifeline for the village. Now, let's slip out of the forge, your face still warm from the fire, and head to the mill. It's a sturdy building, its water wheels slapping the stream with a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. The miller, say, John, is a wiry man, his clothes dusted with flour, his eyes sharp like he's always calculating. He's not just grinding grain, he's the gatekeeper of the village's bread. You bring your sack of barley or rye, hard-won from the fields, and he feeds it into the millstones, two massive circles of stone that rumble and grind, turning grain into flour. The air's thick with dust, and the floor vibrates under your feet. It's a marvel, this machine, driven by the stream's endless push, but it's also a choke point. Everyone needs the mill, and John knows it. Here's a detail that'll raise your eyebrows. Millers weren't exactly the village's favorite people. Oh, they were essential, no question. Without flour, there's no bread, no pottage, no survival. But folks didn't trust them. Why? Because millers had a reputation for shortchanging. You bring a sack of grain, and somehow, the flour you get back seems lighter than it should be. Was some of it siphoned off? Did John keep a bit for himself, to sell or trade? Nobody could prove it, but the whispers followed him like shadows. He's charging you a fee, too, a portion of your flour, maybe a tenth, just for the privilege of using the Lord's mill. It stings, especially when you're scraping by. You're standing there, watching the stones grind, wondering if you're getting a fair deal, and John's just smiling, brushing flour off his hands. No wonder the village gossips had a field day. Let's move on to the weaver's hut, a quieter place, tucked near the edge of the village. Inside, it's dim, the air heavy with the earthy smell of wool. The weaver, maybe a woman named Edith, is hunched over her loom, a wooden frame that looks like it's seen better days. Her hands move with a rhythm that's almost musical, shuttling coarse wool thread back and forth, building cloth one row at a time. Clack clack, the loom sings, as she presses the pedal with her foot, her fingers deft despite the calluses. She's spinning, too, when the loom's idle, twisting raw wool into thread with a drop spindle that twirls like a dancer. The wool's rough, nothing like the soft stuff you'd buy today, but it's what keeps the village warm. Every tunic, every cloak, every blanket starts here, in Edith's hands. Edith's work is slow, meticulous. A single bolt of cloth might take days, even weeks, and it's not just for her family. She's weaving for the village, trading her cloth for grain or eggs, maybe even a bit of the Lord's favor. Her cloth is sturdy, practical, dyed with whatever the village can scrape together, madder root for a dull red, woad for a patchy blue. It's not glamorous, but it's vital. You're watching her, the looms clack filling the silence, and you realize this is the village's armor against the cold, the wind, the world. Without her, you're all just a bad winter away from freezing. These crafts, blacksmith, miller, weaver, they're not just side hustles. They're the village's lifeblood. The blacksmith's tools dig the fields and build the huts. The miller's flour feeds the bellies. The weaver's cloth shields the skin. Together, they make the village self-sufficient, a little island in a world where help's not coming. You don't need a merchant from some far-off city when Thomas can forge a nail, John can grind your grain, and Edith can weave your shirt. It's not perfect, tools break, flour runs short, cloth tears, but it's enough. The village stands because these hands keep working, even when the harvest fails or the Lord's taxes bite. But let's not romanticize it too much. These craftspeople aren't living the high life. Thomas's back is wrecked from years at the anvil. John's got the whole village side-eyeing him, whispering about his extra flour. Edith's eyes are straining in the dim light, her fingers raw from wool. Their work's essential, but it's still work, grueling, repetitive, tied to the same feudal rules as everyone else. They pay the Lord, tithe to the church, and pray the famine doesn't hit too hard. Yet there's a quiet pride in it. You see it in the way Thomas wipes sweat from his brow, holding up a finished plowshare. Or how Edith smooths her cloth, checking for flaws. Even John, for all the gossip, knows the village needs him. Their crafts are their power, their legacy, their way of saying, we're still here. Let's pull back, like stepping out of the village square and looking at it from a hilltop, across centuries. This isn't just a story of one village, frozen in 1150. It's a story that ripples forward, shaping the world we know today. We're diving into the legacy of medieval villages, how their dirt and sweat laid the roots for modern life, and how their spirit still whispers in the way we live, work, and come together. Picture this village one last time, the thatched huts huddled along crooked paths, the fields stretching under a sky that's never quite sunny, the church's bell calling folks to prayer or gossip. It's a small world, barely a speck on a map, but it's part of a web, thousands of villages like it, dotting Europe from England to Italy. These places weren't just homes, they were the engine of the medieval world. The crops grown here fed towns and cities. The cloth woven here warmed merchants and monks. The tools forged here built castles and cathedrals. Without these villages, the Middle Ages would have been a quieter, hungrier, colder place. But their impact didn't stop when the plague hit or the Renaissance dawned. It stretched forward, laying the groundwork for how we live today. Let's start with the land itself. Those fields you've been trudging through, they weren't just patches of dirt. They were the birth of modern agriculture. The way villagers divided their strips, long, narrow plots for each family, rotated between barley, rye, and fallow, wasn't random. It was a system, honed over generations, to squeeze every drop of life from the soil. They didn't have fancy fertilizers or tractors, but they had ingenuity. The three-field system, where one field rested while the others grew, kept the land fertile longer than you'd expect. They used oxen and crude plows to break the heavy clay, and they learned which crops could survive a wet spring or a dry summer. It was trial and error, written in sweat and hunger, but it worked. Fast forward to today, and you see echoes of it in rural farming, crop rotation, communal land management, the stubborn drive to make the earth give more than it wants to. But it's not just the fields. The way these villages were built, their very bones, left a mark you can still trace. Walk through parts of Europe today, say, a sleepy town in southern France or a hamlet in the English countryside, and you might be following the same paths as those 12th century peasants. Many modern villages still hug the layouts of their medieval ancestors. The church at the center, the square where the oven once glowed, the winding lanes that followed cow tracks or dodged a stubborn boulder, they're still there. In places like Tuscany or the Cotswolds, the streets twist and turn, defying modern grids because they grew organically, shaped by feet and carts centuries ago. You're driving through a village in 2025, and you're on a road a peasant walked, cursing the mud, 800 years ago. Isn't that wild? It's like the village is still breathing, its skeleton holding up the present. Now, let's talk about something less tangible but just as powerful, the communal spirit. You've seen it in this village, the shared oven, the neighbors pulling soup during famine, the crowd at Sunday Mass swapping stories. That wasn't just survival, it was a way of life. Villagers didn't just work together, they celebrated together. Picture a harvest feast, tables dragged into the square, barrels of ale cracked open, and everyone, peasant, priest, even the Lord's steward, eating, laughing, maybe dancing a clumsy jig. Or a village fair, where folks traded grain, cloth, or a pig, but also stories, grudges, and gossip. These weren't one-offs, they were the glue that made the village more than a bunch of huts. And that glue, it's still sticking. Think about small-town festivals today. The county fair with its pie contests and tractor pulls, the street market where locals sell jam and handmade scarves, the Christmas tree lighting where everyone knows everyone, it's all got medieval DNA. Those shared feasts and fairs taught people that community isn't just about surviving, it's about joy, about marking time together. You see it in the way a modern village hall hosts a dance, or how a town rallies to rebuild a barn after a fire. It's not just nostalgia, it's a thread that runs from those 12th century harvest tables to the potlucks and parades of today. The village taught us how to lean on each other, not just in crisis but in celebration, and we're still learning that lesson. But let's not get too rosy. This legacy wasn't all warm fuzzies. The feudal system, with its lords and tithes, left scars. It baked inequality into the soil, some had land, some had power, and most had neither. That hierarchy lingered, shaping class systems that persisted into the modern era. The peasant's struggle, tied to the land and the Lord's whims, echoes in the way rural communities today sometimes feel overlooked, squeezed by bigger forces, corporations, governments, or just the march of progress. And yet, the village's resilience, its knack for making do, carried forward too. You see it in rural towns that keep going despite economic swings, and farmers who innovate with less, and communities that rally when the odds are stacked against them. Let's zoom out further. The medieval village wasn't just a place, it was a mindset. It was about finding meaning in the grind, whether you were plowing a field, forging a nail, or sharing a crust of bread. Life was harsh, no question. The weather could ruin you, the Lord could tax you dry, and famine was always a bad season away. But the villagers didn't just endure, they built something. They carved out a life, not with grand ambitions but with stubborn, quiet purpose. You're standing on that hilltop, looking down at the village, and you see it, the smoke curling from chimneys, the fields patched together like a quilt, the people who keep going because stopping's not an option. That's the human spirit, raw and unpolished, and it's what carried us from those muddy lanes to the world we've got now. What's humbling is how close we still are to them. You might live in a city, surrounded by glass and steel, but the village is in you. It's in the way you share a meal with friends, the way you pitch in when a neighbor's in trouble, the way you find purpose in a long day's work. The medieval village taught us that community isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, a spark that keeps the dark at bay. And that spark, it's still burning in every small town that throws a festival, every farmer who plants despite the odds, every person who believes hard work and togetherness can still mean something. Step back into the village one last time, but this time, see it through a wider lens. This place, with its creaking carts and smoky huts, wasn't just a dot on a medieval map. It was a microcosm of what it means to be human. The resilience we saw, the peasant plowing through a storm, the neighbors sharing a crust in famine's grip, the blacksmith hammering despite aching back, that's not just history. It's the same stubborn spark you see today, in a farmer planting after a flood, a community rebuilding after a fire, or even you, pushing through a tough day because giving up's not in your blood. Resilience isn't loud, it's the quiet choice to keep going, to plant one more seed, to face one more dawn. This village taught us that, and we're still living it. Then there's cooperation. You felt it in the communal oven, where villagers kneaded dough side by side, or in the churchyard, passing a bowl of thin soup to keep the weakest alive. That wasn't just survival, it was a pact, an unspoken promise that we're stronger together. Think about your own life. Maybe it's a neighbor lending a tool, a friend splitting their lunch, a town rallying for a cause. That's the village's echo, the lesson that no one makes it alone. In a world that sometimes feels like it's every man for himself, the village reminds us we're built to lean on each other, to share the load, to find joy in the act of giving. It's not just a medieval thing, it's a human thing, woven into our bones. And the rhythm of daily life. That's the heartbeat of it all. The village had a cadence, dawn to dusk, plow to harvest, prayer to feast. It was grueling, sure, but it gave life shape. You woke, you worked, you ate, you laughed, you slept. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. You can still feel that rhythm today, in the way a small town moves through its seasons, planting in spring, festivals in summer, harvests in fall, quiet winters by the fire. Even in a city, you've got your own rhythm, coffee in the morning, work, a chat with a friend, the hum of evening. The village showed us how to find meaning in the ordinary, how to make a life out of small moments. That's not history, that's now, in every step you take. But let's not stay in the abstract. Let's dive into a night when the village's spirit burned brightest, when the line between the living and the dead felt thin as a whisper. It's late October, 1155, and the air's crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. The festival of All Hallows Eve is here, a time to honor the dead, to remember those who've walked these paths before you. The village is transformed. The square, usually bustling with carts and gossip, is alive with a different energy. Bonfires crackle, their flames licking the night, casting shadows that dance across the thatched roofs. The villagers are gathered, their faces glowing in the firelight, their voices low but alive with excitement. This isn't just a party, it's a ritual, a nod to the souls who linger in the dark. You're there, wrapped in a coarse wool cloak, the chill nipping at your fingers. The priest is leading prayers, his voice steady as he blesses the fires, but this night isn't all solemn. There's a hum of something older, something the church doesn't quite control. The elders are telling stories, tales of spirits who wander the fields, of ancestors who watch from the shadows. You're listening, half laughing, half shivering, as a woman recounts how her grandfather's ghost appeared in a storm, pointing to a lost cow. The stories aren't just for scares, they're a way of keeping the dead close, of saying, you're still part of us. It's eerie, but it's also comforting, like the village is bigger than the living, stretching back through time. The kids are the stars of the night. They're running through the square, their laughter cutting through the murmurs. They've been carving turnips, hollowed out, with jagged faces cut into the skin, a candle flickering inside. These aren't the pumpkins you know today. They're smaller, uglier, but just as spooky. The children hold them up, giggling as the light casts ghoulish shadows, placing them on doorsteps or carrying them to ward off evil spirits. It's half game, half ritual, born from a belief that the dead might walk tonight, and a glowing turnip could keep them at bay. You're watching, and it hits you. This is where Halloween comes from, not the candy and costumes, but this raw, communal mix of fear, fun, and remembrance. The bonfires are the heart of it all. They're not just for warmth, they're a beacon, a way to light the path for the dead or maybe scare them off, depending on who you ask. Villagers toss in offerings, bits of bread, a sprig of herbs, a whispered prayer. You're standing close, the heat on your face, the crackle of the flames drowning out the world. Someone starts singing, a low, haunting tune about a soul lost in the woods, and others join in, their voices weaving together. It's not polished, it's rough, real, the kind of song that comes from the gut. You're caught up in it, feeling the village as one, not just a collection of huts but a living thing, bound by fire and story. Let's linger here, by the bonfire, the turnip lanterns glowing like tiny stars. This night, All Hallows Eve, it's the village at its core, resilient, cooperative, alive with the rhythm of shared ritual. It's a moment where the past and present blur, where the dead are as close as the living, and the community feels unbreakable. And that feeling, it's not locked in 1155. You felt it, maybe at a family gathering, a town festival, a night when stories and laughter lit up the dark. The village taught us how to mark these moments, how to find meaning in the cycle of life and death, and we're still carrying that lesson every time we light a candle or tell a ghost story. Now, let's zoom out, one final time. The bonfires are dying down, the villagers drifting back to their huts, the turnip lanterns flickering out. The village is quiet now. At dusk, the stars emerging above the thatched roofs like a promise of rest. This journey, through mud and toil, rules and faith, famine and craft, legacy and ritual, it's been about more than history. It's been about us, about the threads that tie us to those peasants, their struggles, their joys. From their communal oven to our potlucks, from their fields to our farms, from their bonfires to our holidays, the village lives on, not just in stone and street but in the way we endure, connect, and keep going. So, as you drift off tonight, picture that village at dusk, the smoke curling into the sky, the paths winding into the dark. Think of those souls, long gone but still whispering through time, reminding us that life, no matter how hard, is worth living together.